6 March 1945. Cologne, Germany. Shell smoke hangs under a low-ceiling soot, drifting onto the cathedral's stone skin. A Panther sits across a tight intersection, its 75 millimeters locked down the street line. 2 Shermans still burn oil snapping along the gutter. The German crew breathes steady through charcoal filters. They've done this all month. 1 more American will lurch out, wag its hull, show flank, and die the usual sequence. A different engine climbs through the rubble echo, lower hull, broad shoulders of armor, no wag as it slides past the wall. A T26E3 Pershing breaks short. The sight picture goes still pinned like a tack. The German commander waits for the American's hesitation, half a breath to break first shot. It never comes. The 90 millimeters flashes hard, washing light up the cathedral's dark stone. Gas shock punches the street, tossing brick chips like leaves. The Panther's turret bucks. The fighting compartment flares like a furnace with its door cracked. Metal screams in the wind and scrapes the back of a survivor's throat. A figure pops over the rim of the turret, twists in air and hits stiff. No radio call to correct. No order to retake the corner. Only the Pershing's exhaust fan turning and heat crawling up the wall, smearing the edge of every carved line. German guns farther back absorb a single correction. The tank opposite doesn't flinch, and the first beat is everything. Half a second of silence follows. Long enough to know the old formula just died on this corner. By early March 1945, the Western Front is a series of broken cities and bridgeheads pressed hard against the Rhine. Germany still fights, but on borrowed time, units short of fuel, short of spares, short of crews who have survived enough battles to be calm under pressure. Yet, in the tight streets of places like Cologne, one belief still holds in German heads and American nerves: a well-sighted Panther or Tiger can stop a block with a single steady gun. The geometry is simple and cruel. Short lines of sight, stone that shrugs splinters, angles that hide half a hull. If the German shooter gets the first clear view, a Sherman's day ends before the loader settles into his rhythm. That belief keeps German crews confident, even while the rest of the war collapses around them. They have practiced this drill since Normandy ambush at a corner drive, a wedge of fear through the lead American tank, slip to a new angle before artillery corrects and repeat. The Panther's long 75 is not a number on a table. It is a habit-flat trajectory at city distances, a sight that holds well enough between breaths, a recoil that returns to near the same notch on a brick line. In crews that still trust their hands, the gun is a metronome. On the other side, American armor is tired, scuffed, and strangely faster each week. Replacement crews arrive, knowing that in open fields, a Sherman lives by speed and numbers, not by standing chest to chest with heavy German armor. In cities that rule bends toward breakage, too many corners have been paid for in knocked-out hulls and burned sleeves. The question at the Rhine is not whether the United States has more tanks, it does, but whether it can change the local physics of the first shot in a street fight and do it soon enough to keep the bridgeheads expanding instead of clotting. Into that gap comes a small decisive experiment, a handful of T26E3 Pershings shoved straight to the front, not parceled out to schools and depots, but handed to divisions who will use them now. 20 hulls do not change an army, but they can change a block. The gun is heavier, the sight picture steadier, the silhouette lower than a Sherman's, and most important, the decision-making behind the turret is different. Commanders commit these vehicles because the system behind them can absorb damage at speed. A hull that takes a hit will be dragged, patched, or swapped, with a rhythm established by months of learning how to keep fleets of machines moving under fire. Risk feels different when a broken tooth is repaired tonight and the jaw bites again tomorrow. That is the real stake at Cologne. If the German crew's pattern holds, if Panthers continue to dominate corners, American momentum across the Rhine slows and costs rise street by street. If the pattern breaks, if an American tank can stop aim and fire first in the worst ground for it, then the aura that props up German urban tactics evaporates. The Pershing is not a miracle. It is a permission slip that allows American crews to stand in a place where Shermans were trained to slide. The 90 millimeters promise is less about penetration tables than about compressing the time between contact and decision. When the first sight picture is clean and the gun answers without drama, a corner becomes less of a lottery and more of a drill. German confidence at this late date depends on scarcity turned into intimidation. Each Panther is a guarded asset, fuel-rationed routes chosen to save transmissions, shots taken when the probability feels certain. The Americans invert the logic with abundance organized into tempo. A tank lost is a report and a tow job, not a pause in doctrine. That difference leaks into behavior. One side hoards opportunities, the other side spends them to buy speed. In a city, speed is not about miles per hour, but about how little time you give the enemy to adapt between first contact and second shot. Cologne concentrates the question down to one intersection. If the German machine kills again, the old rule lives, and the next blocks will cost the same blood. If the American machine kills first and does it calmly enough to repeat tomorrow, then the rule is dead, not in a briefing, but in muscle memory. The front does not need speeches to recognize a shift. Crews copy what keeps them alive. When word spreads that a U.S. tank can hold its sight at a corner and erase a vaunted defender in a single controlled beat, American commanders push harder and German commanders pull their cats back sooner. Streets that once felt like cul-de-sacs become hallways. The river stops being a wall and starts being an obstacle. This is why the fight inside Cologne matters to more than the men who saw it. It tests whether German faith in the corner ambush can still buy time, and whether American logistics and adaptation can turn a few heavy turrets into a change in behavior. The result decides not just a shot, but the tempo of a campaign. If the first beat belongs to the Pershing, and the second beat happens tomorrow with a repaired fleet, the rest of the song writes itself across the Rhine. At city distance, the fight collapses to 3 beats find hold fire. Everything else, horsepower, factory names, pride feeds those 3 seconds. The German crew builds its survival around the first beat. A Panther that owns a corner exposes as little hull as a man sliding a mirror past a doorway. The glacis is sloped like a roof, rounds hit and glance, and the long 75 throws a flat line. The gunner reads brick courses as hash marks. The sight settles in the space between 2 breaths. He waits for the American to appear wide because wide is habit a Sherman that overswings shows side plate first. The Panther's loader lives one motion ahead, hand on armor-piercing elbow already cocked. The commander does not speak in sentences. He trims the view with 2 words, left, stop. When the view is clean, when the American is still deciding whether to creep or commit, the German breaks the trigger. In these alleys, the gun is a metronome. The first clean tap is supposed to end the song. The American answer begins with refusing to feed that rhythm. A Pershing enters the same geometry, but edits the habits that got Shermans killed. It creeps to a halt without the long rocking settle that makes a hull sway in the sight. The silhouette is lower than a Sherman's, and the shoulders of the armor sit broad, so the driver can square the nose without overexposing the side. The gunner watches the same brick lines, but the glass and the mount let him get to a steady picture fast enough that he doesn't need to chase it. The loader is drilled to make the heavy 90 feel light open case out, round up, ram palm, flat to close. In a good crew, that cycle is just sound, clean, metal on metal, no wasted words. Numbers only matter where they touch bone. The Panther's long 75 keeps a tight, almost rude trajectory inside 300 meters. If it sees side, it opens a Sherman like a door. The turret sight is clear. The return from recoil snaps back to something close to the last notch on a window frame. The front plate repels most casual hits. From the German seat, the city is a friend that absorbs mistakes depth for reversing walls for cover chimneys to read wind. The Pershing's 90 is built to make those same distances feel short. The first round that arrives clean tends to erase the question of a second. In the street that matters more than what a pen chart says, at 1,000 yards. The gun is forgiving of a small tremor. The weight of the system and the way the brake bite is handled keep the picture from floating. What the German expects, a nervous wag before commitment, does not show. When the American breaks the trigger, the blast is not a shout, but a shove. Overpressure slaps the face and throws beards of brick from mortar seams. If steel opens inside the German compartment, it opens like a furnace door. You don't think about metallurgy then. You think about grabbing air. Angles decide the rest. The Panther's gift is the strong forehead and the long arm that punishes mistakes. Its weakness is the rib cage. City fights manufacture ribcage shots. Any misjudged overhang, any curb taken too fast, any need to steer around a crater shows a panel you'd rather keep invisible. The commander knows this, which is why he tries to make the first shot terminate the problem. He does not have fuel to redeploy 3 times for the perfect aspect. He has this corner, and maybe one more. Traverse and depression matter in ways crews feel in their teeth. A gun that can drop its nose 10 degrees lets you use the dip at a gutter without lifting the track onto a curb. A turret that keeps pace with a target sprinting across a storefront keeps you from throwing your whole hull into the swing and exposing the belly plate. The German system likes to traverse with the engine loud. The electric motor sings better with revs. That's fine on a long road. In a quiet kill zone, punching the throttle to feed the turret announces you. The American hydraulic feel turns on with less theatre. The ring moves with a steadier hum. This is not brochure talk. It's whether your loader keeps his feet under him when the commander says left, left, on. Optics are the crew's second set of nerves. The German glass is famously sharp. A Panther gunner can pick out a visor slit through dust that would look like fog to a lesser lens. The American sight is not blind. The Pershing's scope gives a clean enough picture that the limiting factor is how fast the gunner can admit he's ready and brake. In Cologne's light, the flat smoky noon that makes colours go to ash clarity is measured in how fast a man trusts what he's seeing. The crew that believes its sight first wins half the battle before steel moves. Everything the ear hears turns into tempo. A Panther idles with a particular rasp. A Pershing's V8 has its own timbre. Crews learn to strip meaning from sound. Is that engine? Stationary and hunting or moving and blind. A crew that can stop and make their vehicle sound. Still cool, fan steady, gear train, quiet buys a second, where the other side expects a telltale. Clank. That second is often the thickness of a life. Ammunition choice is not academic at this range. High-velocity armor-piercing is a gift when it's on hand. But at city blocks, most American crews will live on confidence in their plain steel to go where it's told, and do enough once inside. Loaders memorize where each round sits. They do not look, they feel. A loader who can keep the heavy 90 fed without the gunner ever asking twice flattens the time between first and follow-up. In German turrets at this point in the war, ammunition stowage is still a compromise, ready rounds close to the breech for speed, the rest tucked under risk that everyone knows but does not discuss. Crew drills compress into a single behavior: do not twitch. The Panther wants the American to flinch, show a sliver of side back 2 feet too far, peak, then commit. The Pershing wants to deny all of those cues. The driver holds the last inch of brake, so the hull does not rock back. The gunner refuses to chase the sight. He lets it come to a halt and presses through. The commander does not narrate, he trims. The loader listens for the clack of the breech and counts his own heartbeats into the pace. When it works, it feels unfair. The first round lands before the other crew believes the engagement has truly begun. Failures, when they come, have the same anatomy. A German crew that forgets how brittle the mechanicals have become tries to pivot too hard and hears a noise that sounds like a wrench in a gearbox. An American crew that reverts to Sherman habits swings too wide and must argue with physics to get the hull square again. In both cases, the argument is settled by the other man's first sight picture. Street furniture rewrites ballistics. A corner cut 6 inches too tight with a heavy gun jams the muzzle into a stucco edge and throws dust onto your own lens. Fire hydrants, tram rails, rubble piles each steals momentum or steals clearance or steals the line of depression you thought you had. The tank that can change plan without broadcasting, the change wins. A smooth, neutral steer that doesn't squeal. A small reverse that doesn't rock the whole hull. A traverse that doesn't beg for RPM. These are survival features you can't list on a chart, but you can feel in your ribs. Communication is the last weapon that isn't steel. American intercom discipline at this stage is brutal and effective nouns only, no adjectives. German crews with experience sound the same, but attrition has put new mouths on old headsets. The difference shows when something unexpected happens, the wrong vehicle appears, or the expected one refuses to behave like a Sherman. The crew that can absorb surprise without filling the net with words is the crew that returns to the 3-beat drill fastest. What looks from above like two machines exchanging mass is from inside a race to make the first sight picture the last. The Panther is built to make the first beat lethal and to survive the trade when the angle is right. The Pershing is built to take the first beat away, to hold still under the blast of its own answer, and to do it again on the next corner, because the men trust that if today breaks the hull, tonight fixes it. In a city that reduces war to alleys and doorframes, the winning specification is not a number, but a behavior: don't wag, don't wait, don't need a second shot. The German commander rests his wrist on the cupola rim and counts the brick courses the way he always does: 3 high to the cornice, 2 to the window ledge, 1 to the corner where the street pinches. He tastes dust on the filter and thinks about the drill. Listen for the Americans' oversteer, the clatter as tracks kiss the curb, the little sway before the driver settles. The gunner hums the sight into the gap they have used all month. Loader's palm sits on armor piercing. Words are rationed. Left stop. The engine goes to idle. The turret motor's tone sits under the blood in his ears. Through the scope, the light is flat and means smoke cutting the sun into a band. He maps his breathing to the reticle drift, hold, and waits for the American to show too much. On the U.S. side, the Pershing creeps until the driver feels curb through the seat, not the pedal. He eases the last inch of brake and stops the hull without the long, tired rock that gives a free read through enemy glass. The gunner's fingers find their home grooves on the handles. His eyes refuse to chase the sight picture. He lets the image come to stillness, like a coin finishing its spin. The commander is a slate of nouns. Panther. Front. On. The loader's world is close breech, face-cut knuckles, the weight of the 90 that never gets lighter no matter how many you lift. He does not look at the round. He feels brass shoulder ram the flat slap of the breech closing. His breath is the metronome he trusts. He hears nothing of God or country, only the gun and the short street. Across the intersection, the German gunner sees the silhouette, a hull line lower than the Sherman's. He's been killing a shoulder of armor that doesn't shiver as it edges into view. The American does not offer the usual gift, the little wag before commitment. The commander tilts his head, not a thought so much as an old habit: wait for the twitch, take the shot between the twitch and the correction. He feels the slight yank of the turret as the electric motor trims left. The sight picture is almost there. Inside the Pershing, the gunner feels that exact same, near there, becoming there. He hears the loader's elbow brush steel, a tiny scrape that means ready, and the commander's voice compresses to a dot. Fire. The trigger is a decision that travels through glove-bone recoil pad spine. The blast erases the small noises. Heat shoves the face. Brick skins lift in sheets, and a fine rain of mortar settles on the driver's shoulders. The muzzle wave curls past the cathedral stone, and the street inhales like a punched lung. The German scope becomes a white-hot window framed by soot. The turret bucks. The gunner's eye stings as if someone rubbed sand into it. Sound stretches into a single metal scream that does not belong to a machine so much as to the air itself. The loader who was about to breathe the word ready tastes something copper and sweet and understands he is on the floor without remembering how he arrived there. The commander's hand gropes for the intercom, toggle out of reflex, call correction, call smoke, call anything but. The lip of the cupola is too hot to hold. In the Pershing, nothing theatrical happens. The gunner rides the recoil back to the notch he started from and holds it there, refusing the human need to chase what he has already hit. The commander says nothing that isn't instruction. On. The loader is already moving. Spent case out, next round up shoulder in palm flat. The movement is a loop burned into muscle. Thought would only slow it. He keeps his feet under him as the turret trims a hair right. He feels more than hears the breech lock. The gunner's cheek weld resets, and through the glass the world narrows to a glow inside a shape that used to look invincible when seen from a Sherman. The German gunner blinks against brightness and realizes the reticle no longer lives inside a plan. He reaches for traverse to swing to smoke to anything that isn't this exact corner, and the motor gives him the first half second with a healthy tone before the engine coughs to feed it. That cough is a confession. He knows the cough. It means the machine wants attention he cannot give it, and time he does not have. He thinks about bailing without meaning to. The commander above him has already counted how many rungs of the turret ladder there are and where they lead. Training tries to stand up inside their bodies. Force of habit meets force of blast. Load, the American loader says, out of ritual more than necessity. Up, the gunner answers, same reason. Hold, the commander says, because he knows how greed ruins clean work. He watches the light in the German turret strobe, then settle, then pulse like a kiln. He waits through half a breath, because a steady sight is the difference between a shot and a statement. On the Panther's floor, the loader's knee is slick. He cannot tell with what. He feels for the next round because there should always be a next round, because that is what keeps men from freezing. His hand meets emptiness where a ready rack should be. Something is bent, or his fingers are not where his mind thinks they are. The commander says a word that is not an order. The gunner, who has dragged his sight back into a rectangle of usefulness by sheer stubbornness, sees the American has not moved, and that unmovement is worse than a rush. It is calm. It is permission. The Pershing's second shot does not feel like a shot. It feels like a closure. The street blinks again and dust lifts in a sheet. The driver sniffs hot air through cloth and does not look aside. He keeps the hull square because that is the only part of this he controls. The gunner tastes grit and refuses to clear his throat until his finger is off the trigger. Someone on the German intercom makes a sound that might have been a word if there had been more oxygen. The commander bangs his elbow hard enough to numb it and is grateful for numbness because it is clean. He climbs without choosing to legs, doing what legs do when a space becomes unspace. At the rim, the world is too bright. Heat slaps his face and rips breath away. He remembers that the street used to be lined with shops. He remembers that in training you jump feet first to spare your head. He goes sideways, because there is no room for feet. In the Pershing, the commander watches a figure arc from the Panther's turret and mark the air with the simple math of gravity. He does not say anything about it. He says, on again lower, this time the way you tell a dog to heel when it already is. The loader slows a fraction because there is no target left to hurry for. The gunner holds for another count and then lifts his face from the glass. Shell smoke crawls up the cathedral wall and blurs the carved stone into melted lines. Behind the Panther, the rest of the German line exists on sound. They hear the first report, then the second, then the fan noise that follows American heavy guns like a soft coin spinning on a table. The section leader knows corners the way a butcher knows bones. He listens for the shift that signals pursuit, a rev, a clank, a careless bump, and hears none. The American heavy feels like a door that opened, not a wolf that leapt. That is worse because it means the process will repeat at the next corner with the same quiet confidence. The Pershing does its checks. Driver glances, the needles feels coolant smell that isn't quite smell, just habit. Loader clears the floor because a tidy floor solves problems before they happen. Gunner keeps the sight alive a second longer in case the world disagrees with what they think they did. The commander keys the net and gives nouns and a street name and a result. No adjectives. The reply comes back with a tone that says, the battalion map just shifted a line 2 blocks in their favour. On the German side, a sergeant 2 streets back does arithmetic with what he has left. Fuel is not numbers on a form. Fuel means whether you can afford a second position. He moves his platoon 1 building at a time, not because caution earns medals, but because transmissions are more brittle than men right now, and he knows what a hard pivot costs. He scolds no one. He does not need to. The crewmen have already felt what he would say in their teeth. American infantry begin to own the sidewalks with the casual dread of men who have walked into too many traps to call any victory clean. They nod at the tank because tanks keep streets shorter. Someone counts paces to the next bend. Someone else counts how many magazines remain on a harness. The Pershing's engine note drops, then returns to idle, then settles into the background roar of a city, losing the argument it tried to make at gunpoint. Later, men will write reports that use tidy phrases, engaged, neutralized, moved, and they will be true and also inadequate. What happened inside the machines will not fit. What the German crew learned was not in a paragraph, but in the way their bodies stopped trusting a pattern that had kept them alive since summer. What the American crew learned was not pride, but a smaller, colder certainty. If they held still when the street wanted them to move, their gun would answer first, and if something broke today, hands behind them would unbreak it by morning. The last thing both sides remember is the shape of the silence. It sits for half a second after the second shot before the city fills it. It tastes of dust and hot paint. It explains itself without language. The corner is no longer theirs. Systems decide whether a corner is a duel or a procedure. In Cologne, the shot you saw was a mechanic's signature as much as a gunner's. The Pershing's round did not travel alone. It rode on months of decisions that turned broken machines into tomorrow's strength and turned scarcity into fear. The American army had already rewritten its maintenance map by the time heavy tanks reached the Rhine. What began in North Africa as a scramble parts buried in depots, recovery improvised with ropes and bad language, became by 1944-45 a ladder of echelons that every crew could climb without asking who owned the wrench. At the curb, where a track pin shears the crew and company mechanics handle it with what is on the fender and in the tool roll. A little farther to the rear, the battalion maintenance platoon has welders, a lathe in a van body, a tent for engines. Farther still, sit ordnance companies and depots that do the jobs too big for a field day, gearboxes, barrels, turret rings. The ladder works because the rungs are close. No one waits for a miracle. They wait for a wrecker. Recovery is a quiet weapon. American formations invest in vehicles whose only job is to drag the wounded back into the fight. M31, M32. Shermans with A-frames and winches, tank transporters that eat distance without eating tracks, wreckers that pull hulls out of cellars. Towing rules are conservative and written down. Commanders know which pairings bend metal and which bring a tank home whole. A knocked-out Sherman or Pershing is not a monument, it is a task. Crews strip what they must chalk and address on the glacis and send a grid to the rear. Night covers the rest. In the morning the space is empty, and the maintenance officer has another thing to account for. Standardization shortens every hour of that cycle. American tanks share families of parts across thousands of hulls. Filters, fittings, starters, electric motors, radios, periscopes, each appears in crates with the same numbers painted on the same sides in the same places. A mechanic can fix a thing he has never seen, because the bolts are where the bolts live on the last one. When a Pershing, a new type, arrives, its alien pieces are the minority. Everything that can be common is common by policy, not by luck. That means a depot can pre-stage what will break because it is the same menu that broke in Italy and France. It also means cannibalization is not a sin. It is a sanctioned tactic. A hull too far gone becomes a donor, and the paperwork catches up later. Training mirrors the hardware. Ordnance battalions train drivers and gunners to preserve the machine without losing speed. No cavalry swing becomes doctrine, not advice. Drivers learn to brake without rocking the hull because rocking breaks sights and loosens teeth. Loaders learn that clean floors prevent torn ankles, and torn ankles prevent missed rounds. The maintenance platoon drills under blackout to change power packs to swap a differential with a chainfall, and a prayer to triage what must move now and what can wait for daylight. The effect is, behavioral crews do not accept dead space in the day. They expect a fix by night. Supply does not need to be heroic to be decisive. It needs to be frequent. Fuel points are mapped like artillery positions and guarded with the superstition reserved for wells in a desert. Ammunition trucks move in schedules a quartermaster understands and a company commander can predict. On a good day, an armoured battalion feels like a well with a hose stuck in it. You open the tap and what you asked for arrives. On a bad day, you still have a man 3 tents back who can tell you how many hours until the hose spits again. Command sees all of this as permission. A colonel who knows his wounded will not become strays can risk the kind of corner the Pershing took. A general who knows a depot will swallow tonight what today tore can push another 10 blocks. That sense of safety does not soften him. It hardens his schedule. In this system, the difference between bold and reckless is a phone call to ordnance. Across the street, Germany tries to run the same game on a rations card. Factories are dispersed. Railroads are wounded. Bridges are nervy skeletons that may or may not stand tomorrow. A Panther lost is a budget crisis at platoon level and a political problem at army level. The machine is good where it is good gun optics forehead, but it is also built into a maintenance corner by 1945. Transmissions and final drives demand gentleness a city does not offer. Field expedients pile up clutch adjustments that hold for a day and fail the next turn, scavenged parts that fit almost, oils and fuels stretched beyond spec. Berger Panthers exist but are never enough. Tractors and half-tracks do work they were not born for and break doing it. Towing is a risk calculation. The right tow saves a tank, the wrong tow destroys two. Men weigh the risk under fire and choose to leave a hull rather than wreck the rescuer. Every abandonment teaches a lesson save the ones still running. German workshops are full of talent and empty of predictability. A skilled fitter with a mill can resurrect a wreck, but he needs electricity, raw stock, and time. Electricity flickers. Raw stock goes missing in transit. Time runs out because the front moved without asking. Rail interdiction means a wheel set that used to get a gearbox across the country in a day now takes a week if it moves at all. Truck columns do heroic work, up and down clogged roads until tires show canvas and engines show steam. The result is not a moral failing, it is a calendar. A Panther that could be made right in 3 days if the world stood still requires 10 because the world does not. Doctrine folds around scarcity, the way paper folds around a knife. Battalion orders instruct caution in ways crews understand instinctively. Ambush is preferred to maneuver not simply because it kills, but because it does not spend transmission life. Positions are assigned for their angles and for their mercy on the drivetrain. Displacement is minimized because fuel is a ration and every pivot is a prayer. Ammunition is husbanded. Smoke is saved. Radios are used sparingly because electric systems behave like tired men in winter, capable 1 hour fragile the next. Units learn to move at dusk to shorten the day during which they can be found by fighter bombers who have turned roads into contracts with small print. Crew experience washes out of the system faster than the factories can pour metal in. Men who can sense the difference between a harmless clunk and the first note of failure are rare. Replacements arrive trained but not trained by the city they are about to fight in. That means words fill the intercom when silence would have served, and silence holds when warning would have saved a gearbox or a life. The commander, who used to take a half chance for a full kill, now waits for a whole chance to avoid the kind of chase that ends in a breakdown and a tow rope that never comes. Allied air pressure does not kill every tank. It kills time. A road that used to be a 2-hour move is a day's work with detours and hides. A depot that used to ship on schedule now ships by mood and moon. This matters because maintenance is a clock. Bearings dry, seals crack, batteries sulk if the truck with the pallet is 2 days late instead of 1. When the next fight comes, the machine brings yesterday's small hurts with it. The American system is not flawless. Crews pay in burnt sleeves, and men crushed under loads that swing wrong in the dark. Depots mislabel crates. Traffic jams turn ambition into a line of idling engines you could walk past faster than the column moves. But the errors are noise on a signal that stays strong. If it breaks, it returns. Combat behavior absorbs that signal. A Pershing crew that takes a hit and limps out trusts that a wrecker will appear before midnight. They do not chain 2 half-broken tanks together and hope both reach a ghost workshop. A battalion commander who loses 3 runners in a day puts in chits and expects frames to appear inside the week. He shapes tomorrow's attack with that expectation in his bones. German behavior absorbs the opposite. A Panther crew that hears something ugly in the final drive weighs a corner not only by enemy angle, but by whether this is the hill on which the gearbox dies. A company commander who watches a Berger Panther work through the night to save a single hull knows he will not get another recovery like that before the week ends, and decides consciously or not that today's ambush must end after the first shot, not the third. The battalion that could own an alley chooses to own a doorway because a doorway is cheaper. Procurement and doctrine move together when they are healthy. American ordnance officers sit with operations officers and write rules that assume attrition with replacement. Tanks are tools. Tools wear and shops exist to reverse wear. The result is aggression bounded by maintenance, not paralyzed by it. German staff try to do the same thing but live in a different economy. Tools wear and must be guarded because the shop is a rumour, 5 towns back, and the rail bridge behind it is smoke. The result is caution masquerading as cunning. Cunning wins an hour. Tempo wins a day. There is also a moral inlet here that has nothing to do with speeches. Crews who believe they will be repaired accept risk they would otherwise reject. Crews who believe they are burning their last clutch plate act like men spending heirlooms. In Cologne, the Pershing's calm was not bravado. It was policy turning into posture. The Panther's hesitation was not cowardice. It was accounting fuel spares, hours left on a machine that felt old at the pivot. Scale multiplies everything. One battalion with a short repair loop can batter through a city block. A corps with the same loop can roll a river line. An army with it can keep pressure on a country that is running out of pivots. You saw a single shot. Behind it were tow chains, parts, books, depot, rosters, drivers, who learned to stop without rocking mechanics, who learned to weld in wind quartermasters, who learned that a promise kept on Tuesday means a block taken on Wednesday. When the day ends, the scoreboard lies. If it counts, only kills. The question that matters for tomorrow's map is simpler. How many runners do you bring to first light, and how fast can you replace the ones that did not make it? The Pershing's presence at that corner was the end of many acts procurement, choices that favoured common parts over clever ones, training that punished twitching, a recovery culture that considered a deadlined tank a challenge, not a tomb. The Panther's failure to repeat its old trick was the sum of different acts, routes chosen to save transmissions, fuel hoarded like medicine, workshops that moved, then moved again, until movement itself became the job. Doctrine is the script. Logistics is whether you get to finish the scene. In March 1945, American units finished more scenes than they started. German units started more than they could finish. That is why one crew could hold still long enough to fire first, and why the other crew discovered that the first beat belonged to someone else now. The repair cycle did not write the round's trajectory. It wrote the crew's confidence, and confidence underwrites every clean shot in a dirty street. The myth did not fall to a speech. It failed an exam that took less than a minute. For months, German armour in cities lived on a rule that felt like physics: own the corner, take the first clean look, end the fight. Crews arranged their nerves around it. Commanders drew city arrows that assumed it. Infantry on both sides told new men to respect it like a hot stove. Cologne puts that rule under a light and finds it hollow. A heavy American tank stops, refuses to wag answers first. Nothing mystical occurs. No trick shot. No divine luck. Just steadiness where panic used to live. What dies in that half-second of silence after the second shot is not a single Panther. It is the body memory that said, "Here we are, the ones who decide." The break is mental before it is statistical. In the hours after German section, leaders do not say the word aura, but they choose like men who have lost it. They shorten their ambush windows. They move less and hide more. They call for infantry screens earlier. They give up corners that once felt like home field and pick hallways with longer fields of view because long feels safer than near now. The American heavy has infected the short range. The near shot no longer belongs to them by default. Up the chain, the same adjustment spreads in quieter language. A battalion that used to spend 2 Panthers to own a square spends 1 to watch 2 streets and promises the other to a reserve that never arrives. Reports mention ammunition saved, transmissions preserved, fuel conserved. All of those words mean the same thing: we cannot pay the old price for the old effect. Scarcity was always a fact. Now it becomes behavior. When a creed meets a calendar, the calendar wins. On the American side, the adjustment flows the other way. Calm is no longer the exception earned by a lucky angle. It is the baseline taught at the morning brief. The story from the corner spreads by rumor and radio. You can hold still in the worst ground and win the first beat if you keep the hull square and let the sight settle. Platoons that used to frame every city block as a tax begin to frame some as an opportunity. Put the heavy on the hinge feed. It clear fields through alleys and let its first answer buy infantry 20 meters of safe wall. The lesson is not Pershing invincible. It is pattern broken. Patterns once broken stay broken. That is the inflection. Before Cologne, German crews could tell themselves that the nights they bled were caused by the open field, the fighter bombers, the pylon of numbers, unfair contexts fixable with discipline and better weather. The corner was the last sanctuary of craft. After Cologne, sanctuary becomes superstition. The same craft still matters angles, breath the loader's wrists, but it no longer owns the coin toss. The first sight picture can now live in an American scope on a street built for German nerves. That knowledge sits in a man's fingers the next time he grips the traverse handle. It slows him by a sliver, and that sliver is fatal in the place where everything happens between two heartbeats. Language changes because language always follows risk. Where orders once said engage and displace, they begin to say observe and engage if favorable. Favorable shrinks. In debriefs, veteran gunners speak less about killing and more about surviving, how to back an extra meter without popping a track, how to find a shadow that hides the fan heat, how to time a move for the drone of distant engines that might be jabos. Survival becomes the center of the page. Predators who spend a day acting like prey do not return to the old walk the next morning. The infantry feel it in their legs. German riflemen who used to ride a tank's confidence into a block now wait for the tank to be sure. The tank waits for fuel for a burger Panther that might not come for a commander's promise that cannot be kept twice in a week. American riflemen notice the pause. They cross the last 10 meters behind armor that no longer flinches at the mouth of the street. They hear the different kind of quiet after a heavy American gun goes off, the quiet of a crew that expects to be here again tomorrow. If you insist on a sentence that names what died, it is this: the belief that German heavy armor could dictate the terms of contact at city distance. That belief gave courage to small units long after their nation ran out of ways to supply them. It turned scarcity into theater. It made a single Panther feel like a lock on a block that no column could pick without blood. When the Pershing held still and erased that block in a controlled beat, the lock became hardware, not legend. Hardware can be outpaced by a repair shop. Legends cannot. Once demoted, the legend never climbs back. The collapse is seen again and again in the weeks that follow, not always on film but in choices repeated across the front. German tanks avoid corners they would once have hunted. They hold ground to buy time, not to bleed enemies. When they fire, they intend the first round to be the whole engagement, not the opening to a stalking sequence. The second and third rounds belong to men with confidence and time is the rarest commodity left. American armor treats each corner not as a duel, but as an item on a list. It completes the item and moves to the next, because the list will be the same tomorrow and the day after until the river is behind them. Myths die untidily. No bugle marks the moment. Men still fight hard, some still win corners the old way. But the curve bends. The conversations in cupolas and in cellars, the annotated maps on tank desks, the tone of the net after contact, these show a change you can measure without numbers. Cologne is the picture people remember because a camera was there. The reality is 1,000 small decisions that tilt toward caution on one side and toward tempo on the other. Once that tilt starts, it gathers itself like a slope collecting rain. The sentence German crews do not say out loud, because saying it would be treason to their craft, is simple: we are no longer the monster here. The monster is a system that fixes what it breaks fast enough to be fearless. You cannot outshoot that with a better optic or a proud nameplate. You can only survive it longer, and longer is not victory. The corner test has a new answer now, and everyone learns it the first time they feel the half-second of silence after an American heavy fires first. That is all an era needs to end. After Cologne, the footage travels faster than any memo. Crews see it in briefing tents projected on sheets, or described by men who claim they were 3 streets over and heard the second shot. It becomes shorthand in platoon talk: hold the sight, don't wag, first beat wins. Maintenance officers like the film for different reasons. They point at the heavy hull working a corner and say, this is what you get when recovery spares and training meet at the curb. Commanders file it under proof risk. Backed by a net is not gambling. On maps, the change shows up as steadier arrows inside cities. American armor does not sprint, it keeps appointments. Blocks that used to require 2 companies and a day now fall to a company and an hour, not because steel grew harder, but because the delay between contact and correction shrank. Infantry units adjust their rhythm, short moves hooked to the gun's first answer, quicker bounds, fewer dead spaces where nothing covers no one. Field reports stop treating heavy German armor as a weather event and return it to the column of enemy equipment dangerous but solvable. German behavior bends the other way. Tank companies write that they are holding crossings rather than hunting approaches. Requests for recovery assets arrive earlier and with more apology. Crews conserve transmission life with the same care once reserved for ammunition. When they choose corners, they choose exit routes first. The myth that one well-sighted cat can freeze a neighborhood lingers in voices, but it no longer organizes the day. More often, a single round marks a place, then smoke, then absence. The second and third rounds, the stalking sequence that used to turn alleys into galleries, appear less, because machines and hours to support them are fewer. The documentary trace is tidy. The signal core reel is catalogued. The crew names of the Pershing are typed into logs. The burned-out German hull is measured by men with notebooks. But the real legacy is practical and local. Drivers in new crews are taught to stop without the long rock. Loaders learn hand placement until the 90 feels like a smaller gun. Gunners are scolded for chasing sights. Maintenance men standardize field swaps into checklists that a tired corporal can run in the rain. The corner becomes a process, not a dare. What this buys is momentum that does not look dramatic on a calendar, but feels heavy on the ground. Bridges over the Rhine are taken, repaired, or bypassed. Road nets that once threatened to strangle columns instead absorb them. The last counterattacks west of the river arrive as stabs, not punches. When German armour appears, it is met by units that do not panic at distance zero. The first shot is not a coin flip anymore. It is a skill underwritten by a system. A force that can rely on that repeats contact and repetition wins sectors. None of this turns heavy German tanks into harmless shapes. A misread angle still kills. A careless swing still offers a rib to a long 75. Cologne does not repeal geometry, it changes habit. The difference shows in casualty graphs that slope less steeply and in road miles gained that stack more evenly week to week. It shows in after-action lines that use engaged and moved instead of halted and reorganized. It shows in how often a knocked-out American hull reappears on the roster 2 weeks later with fresh paint on the turret numbers. For Germany, the legacy is a narrowing of options. Armour becomes a bargaining chip to trade for days rather than a hammer to shape weeks. Experienced crews become custodians more than hunters. Workshops do clever things with little, but cleverness cannot refill tanks or smooth gear teeth ground flat by too many forced pivots. The city, once friendly to the ambush, now also belongs to the opponent, who is willing to stand in it and who will be there again tomorrow with the same calm. The film keeps its hold because it captures something. Armies usually hide the exact second a pattern dies. Students will slow the clip and point at frame numbers. Veterans will point at the stillness before the shot and say, "The lesson is there." Museums will display the machines. Manuals will distill the drills. The men who were nearest will remember heat more than images. The story survives because it is useful to people who must do similar work in other ruins. A question hangs over all of this, and belongs to the audience as much as to the crews. If the heavy had arrived 6 months earlier, does late-war German armour change behaviour, or does the same repair loop decide the same corners anyway? And another. When a machine is better on paper but too rare and too fragile to risk, how much does better matter? The answers are not about pride. They are about calendars, pipelines, and whether courage is backed by a tow chain. From here, the path leads naturally to the duel that wasn't Panther versus Sherman, a match argued in tables and photographs for 80 years. The next chapter leaves the cathedral's shadow for hedgerows and open fields, then returns to streets to ask why a cheap medium multiplied and maintained could break a perfect medium that arrived with a finer gun and sharper glass. The film from Cologne will ride with us, because the rule it teaches first beat belongs to the crew that can afford to stand still, will show again in different light on different corners until the last bridge is passed and the river is only a line on a map.